the great John Dickinson, boots on the ground. He's been in Green Bay. He's been in Buffalo. He's been in Denver with the Warriors. This is all within the last 45 minutes. JD is back on the back here in the Bay. JD, how are you doing?
What's going on, Larry? Yeah, good to be with you, man. And it felt a little bit to me, I don't know about you, but you've touched on this, from being at Santa Clara today for the 1 day of 49ers availability here on the short week where they play on Thursday. It felt, as much as these guys know they're up against it and have to run the table, and still running the table may not quite be good enough, did it feel a little bit like the vibes were back for the Niners today? A little bit? Was it a little bit? Is it just one win, or did it feel like they're starting to gain a little bit of confidence even off of the one win against the Bears? Am I reaching, Larry? I
don't think so. I mean, I don't know if I like this, but it's an incredibly confident room. I mean, you know what I mean? I don't know if I like that because they haven't played all that well, and the record is still up sub 500. But
and the Rams are way better than the Bears, right? Especially offensively.
Exactly. So, I think there is definitely, first of all, when you lose and lose and lose, it's just like it's hell. And then when you finally get a win, you can take a breath. Okay, so now they're taking a breath. But if they actually beat the Rams, I think that may add a little bit of strut back to their walk, because the Rams just put up 40 on the Bills' defense, and the Rams are, they lost to the Rams without Puka and without Kupp, and now they've got both. So if they Niners get this win Thursday night, they're going to be feeling pretty good going into those 3 extra days off. And I think, it was interesting, too, that Kyle, JD, said that we're really looking forward to those 3 extra days. It's almost like a mini bye week. We kind of need it. And maybe that will help them get going. But let me ask you this. I mean, after watching Sunday, and we were, literally sitting pretty much next to each other during this game, but was Sunday in your mind about the Niners and their resurgence, or was it about the ineptitude of the Bears?
I think a lot of it was the ineptitude of the Bears, and I thought it was interesting to hear George Kittle say that basically the Bears had gone away from some things defensively, right? They fire Matt Eberflus, who was, ran the defense, a defensive-oriented head coach and a defensive coordinator before taking the head coaching job with the Bears, and that the Niners basically, the Bears changed their defense and had gone away from some things that were working. So you fire the head coach, but yet you're a pretty good defensive team, and then you change some things defensively and make yourself not as good defensively and more vulnerable defensively. So I found that to be kind of an interesting little tell from George Kittle. I thought a lot of the ways that the Bears struggle are areas where the 49ers really, all the sacks, right?
Right.
Not having Nick Bosa, Caleb Williams holding the ball too long, their inability to protect Caleb Williams. It really set up the day nicely for guys like Leonard Floyd and Yetur Gross-Matos and Malik Collins to finally kind of have their day. And so I thought it was a great matchup at what turned out to be the perfect time. But you know what? If the Niners were going to flip the season and run the table and have a shot, then they needed one of these games that gave them the confidence, regardless of opponent or the opponent situation. They needed one of these games that gave them the confidence that they could look like themselves against anybody, because we had not seen the 49ers look like themselves even in games they were winning. How many times they would maybe look like themselves, but then they wouldn't for a couple of series, and all of a sudden the Cowboys have the ball down 6, even though they'd kind of dominated the game. So to dominate and look like the best version of yourself, I think is important despite the opponent and the opponent's circumstances, which we can look back on now and go, oh, yeah, well, the Niners are in a way better place than the Bears, who are a mess and fired their coach and looked in a lot of ways like they quit on Sunday.
I think it was a little bit of both. Let's jump to Debo. Weigh in on Debo. Debo says, I'm not struggling. I'm not getting the ball. I mean, the great debate on this Tuesday night. Is Debo Samuel struggling or not? What say you?
Yeah.
Where do you weigh in on this?
he's struggling because plays that they had run for him in the past to get him big yards, a lot of the running plays, a lot of little, the little pass plays that are really run plays because they're behind the line of scrimmage. Those plays that historically are able to get him going have not worked. And I think part of it is teams are ready for it, but I think part of it is the fact that he's naturally either lost a step or he's carrying a little bit more around with him. Like so I think both of those things are in play. And let's also be honest here. He's dropped some passes. Like, they've thrown the ball to him, and he's dropped some passes this year.
Leads the team in drops.
Yeah, so, let's just be a little bit real. Like, could they be looking to get him the ball more? I guess, but here's my thing. In what ways could they really be getting him the ball more than they already are? In ways that work, right? Like, they could be force-feeding the run. They could be lining him up in the gun, lining up Purdy in the gun with Debo, right next to him and gun run it a little bit more. But Kyle Shanahan had gone away with that because it hadn't been working. So I don't know. I think he's struggling. I think he's dropped some. I think he looks less explosive. And I think that's led Kyle Shanahan to attempt to go in a different direction in terms of who he looks to get the ball to. So, no, I think it is more about Debo than it is about trying to force feed Debo the rock. Now, that being said, would it surprise you, Larry, if the Niners really look to force feed Debo the rock against the Rams, a team he's had a lot of success against, and with the Niners potentially even more banged up now with Guerrero part of the injury report?
I just want to see him be creative in how they get him the ball, because it seems like it's, we've seen some patterns and maybe the defense is noticing those same patterns. He doesn't seem like he's getting off as a runner. The one touch I'd give him that he doesn't get now is I'd fire Jacob Cowing as my punt returner and just say, Jacob, you look so nervous out there. I'm giving that job to Debo. I'd give him all the returns. I'd probably use Cowing a little bit more from scrimmage as a downfield receiver and take him off of the punt return. But let me ask you this. Who, in your mind, who should Shanahan feature with no CMC, no Mason, no Ayuk? I mean, who in your mind would you like to see featured?
Yeah, I mean, that's a real tough one, because I think when you look at next man up, it's probably got to be Patrick Taylor, right? Surely next man up on the depth chart. Who would get but I don't view Patrick Taylor as being an explosive type runner. So I feel almost as if you might want to either give Debo another shot, or does this become a week where your guy Keyshawn Vaughn, who they had and then was gone and then repicked back up, could this be that sort of that guy out of nowhere that all of a sudden everybody's like, why is this guy getting the bulk of the carries for the San Francisco 49ers? Oh, because it's funny. A lot of the guys that the Niners are able to pick up, guys on the back end of the roster, and I think Kyle addressed this at one point, the fact that a couple of days ago, I guess it was yesterday. I guess it was yesterday. Just the fact that other than the McCaffrey year, all my days are running together. Apologies, but other than the McCaffrey year, they had used 3-4 running backs every year. And guys, when you go deep on the depth chart, have still been able to come in and be successful because there is a specific type that Kyle Shanahan and Bobby Turner are looking for in terms of their skill set. So maybe it is a Keyshawn Vaughn if it can't be Guerrero, and Taylor, somebody that's not exactly the most explosive, or maybe it is a little bit more that committee that everybody's kind of been wanting, but it's a Taylor, Debo, Keyshawn Vaughn kind of combination.
I don't know if you heard Lynch this morning with Murph and Marcus, but Lynch, Murph was asking him, who's going to be the running back. And John, I'll give John credit. John wasn't like, oh, my God. He was like, hey, you know what? We like these guys. We like Israel Abanaconda. We like Keyshawn Vaughn. These guys are NFL backs. We feel good about what we got. And I feel good about what they got as well, and whether they have to lean on on any of their guys, really. I think they got a pretty stacked situation there. I feel pretty good about their running backs. Let me ask you this: What's the key? What's the key to victory tomorrow night or Thursday night against the Rams? What's going to be the number one thing that has to get done Thursday night for the Niners to be victorious?
I really worry about the 49ers' ability to stop the Rams. Now, maybe it's a recency bias, but I look at what Nakua is doing. I look at what Cooper Kupp is doing. I look at Stafford. I look at the ability of the Rams to run the ball. Like I really look at it from that lens of kind of like the Packer game, where it was LaFleur, and LaFleur, a lot like Shanahan, also like McVay, they look at weaknesses in the opposition and where can you exploit, and where have the 49ers been exploitable. The run and throwing the football, in particular throwing the football over the middle. And when the Rams are cooking, they're throwing the football over the middle to Nakua, they're throwing the football over the middle to Cooper Kupp, and Matthew Stafford's just commanding the game, and they're able to run it. So my big concern for the Niners, above everything else, looking to Thursday, is can they slow down the Rams offense, looking at what they did. Again, maybe it's a little bit of recency bias on my part, considering what they did against Buffalo. But I think the 49ers defense, as well as they played against the Bears, still really vulnerable to elite offensive coordinators, elite quarterbacks, and skill players that can run the ball and or catch the ball over the middle. In a lot of ways, the Rams look like a pretty bad matchup, and they were still able to move the ball on the 49ers early in the year, as you mentioned right off the top, without Cooper Kupp, without Nakua, so I think when you look at the Niners, that's my big fear in this one, and I think in conjunction with that, the Niners may have to be very comfortable, Larry, winning a shootout. They have to be comfortable, I think, in this game, scoring 30-plus and almost believing that that's the way that they're going to have to win it. Maybe you get a turnover. Maybe you get a stop that alters the momentum a little bit here and there. And the Rams also make plays on special teams. The Rams and help flip the game the first time these two teams played back in September on special teams. To me, the 49ers have to not have special teams be a negative. So be prepared to sling it if you got to sling it and match the Rams. Try to get a stop or a turnover that offset things, and don't get beat on special teams when the Rams tend to have an advantage on special teams against most teams. They make plays with their special teams. We've seen them do it against the Niners. I know that's a lot. It's a tall task. The Rams have kind of been one of those teams that every time you start to think, oh, wow, they're pretty good, then they maybe have a little bit of a clunker. We've seen the Niners be really vulnerable against the Rams at times and then win, right? Really vulnerable in their season over the years and then win a big regular season game that sets them in a more positive path. Niners are going to need that again. I don't, though, love this matchup. I really don't. Maybe I'm overly concerned with what they did against the Bills, but I think this is a really difficult matchup and a completely different test than the one that the 49ers passed a couple of days ago against Chicago.
I think, when the Niners score 30 or more this year, they're 5-0. But when they score 20 or more this year, they're 6-2. So, score 20 points and don't turn it over. When they win the turnover battle on the year, they're 4-1. They're 40-8, by the way, since Shanahan's been here. When they win the turnover battle, that seems like a key. Who do you think's the better coach? They're both hired the same time. Shanahan's 70-58, 8-4 in the playoffs. McVay's 77-51, slightly better win percentage. Not as good of a playoff record, but he's got a Super Bowl and not as good of a head-to-head record. Who's the better coach, McVay or Shanahan?
Yeah, I think it's McVay. I mean, McVay's got the Super Bowl. I think McVay's also had a multiple years where he's won multiple playoff games, which, Shanahan's done it obviously 4 years, even though he hasn't won the last game of any year to be 8-4 in the playoffs. And yeah, the head-to-head has gone to Shanahan. But I think the job really that McVay's done last year and this year, last year's team was believed to be in a rebuild. Right? Coming into the year, the Rams were viewed as a team that was in a rebuild. They made the playoffs last year. This year, you didn't really know what to expect. Things get off the rails. They have injuries to a bunch of guys, and they're in line to potentially make the playoffs this year. And so, to me, McVay's got the Super Bowl. He's got the playoff wins. But I think the other thing McVay has on Kyle Shanahan is he's had some seasons that have gone off the rails a little bit, and he's kept it on track. And the one thing we really, maybe haven't seen as much is that middling level of talent or semi-rebuild year for the Niners ended. Oh, wow, great year. Made the playoffs, won a playoff game, got beat. I think in a lot of ways McVay's been able to do it with lesser talent in some of these years where he hasn't gotten to the final game or gotten over the hump to win the Super Bowl. Oh, by the way, he's got the Super Bowl on top of that, and a loss to Belichick and Brady in the other Super Bowl. So
13-3.
Yeah, I'm going with McVay, but Shanahan should be proud of what he's accomplished to this point as well.
I'll go to Shanahan just so I can hopefully curry favor with the coach. All right, JD, appreciate you, man. Have a great night. We will see you tomorrow.
All right, thanks, Larry.